So I spent, I don't know, let's see, probably about 20 years cooking around the objectivist, small government, minarchist stuff, where it was like, okay, separation of economics and state for the same reason as separation of church and state. But, okay, police, military, law courts, maybe some prisons, that like really minarchist kind of government. And the non-aggression principle, do not initiate the use of force against others. People were like, they always had a dance around that, always had a kind of dance around that. It's like, okay, well, moving right along, it's like you're showing a house and there's like one body hanging in one room and it's like, okay, moving right along, we can fix that right off. Let's move right along. Look at this countertop. It's beautiful. No bodies.
Yeah.
And so for me, that always kind of bothered me, but I thought it was the best you could get to. I thought it was the best you could get to. Like if I live to 100, I'm not going to be like, wow, I died really young, unless they invent some weird cryogenic thing, unless you'd live to 1,000, in which case I died as a teenager. And so I thought that was the best you could get. So then I'm at work back in my entrepreneurial days. I was chief technical officer. Then I was director of marketing for another company. And I'm having a conversation with a guy, and he's a smart guy at the office. And he's like, we were at lunch, and he was like, oh, yeah, well, how would the environmental protections occur in your kind of environment, right? And I was giving him the usual libertarian answers. And then I was like, well, wait a minute. You could buy insurance for your air quality. You could buy insurance for your water quality. And that would mean that there'd be millions of dollars of an insurance company that'd be hanging in the balance of keeping your air and water clean. And I was like, wow. Never really thought of that before. And this whole idea of non-state actors being able to negotiate on your behalf, having people who have a direct financial incentive. Yeah. Because, the whole idea of the state is this idea that there's this group of people who are just going to be selflessly devoted to the welfare of strangers. Like that horrible quote from Blanche Dubois, I have always depended on the kindness of strangers, like a terrifying life to live in, right? Because you got to be manipulative all the time. And with that, I was like, boom. And I started thinking about it more. Could we do defense this way? Could we do courts this way? And I just started really, really thinking about it. And the great thing about that for me, Owen, was this great, because when you have a principle like the non-aggression principle and you create this big void where it doesn't apply. The opposite applies. And the initiation of the use of force is terrible. But we need these things so the government can do it. And it's like, it's like it's a splinter in the mind's eye. It's like you ever do a toothpick in your teeth and then it breaks off and you got like a big piece of wood wedged in between your teeth. They're like, I think I may have created more of a problem than I was solving. And for that, for me, it was like, okay, stateless society, voluntarism, anarcho-capitalism, whatever you want to call it, that is the principle. And no violation, no exception, no undermining. That is the principle as it goes. It must have been like, when Einstein said, oh, speed of light is constant. Let's just work from there. Sounds crazy. You got weird time stuff going on and you go faster and faster and you get more and more mass and you slow down time. But so it feels really, really freaky, but it explains so much. And just having that principle, the non-aggression principle, in the family, in politics, in business, in relationships, it's like, because the amount of hamsters you got to keep going when you have a contradiction in your thinking, to me, is enormous and it's exhausting. I almost burned out on minarchism because it's like, I can't keep these helium balloons from floating away anymore and so for me, that moment where I was like, okay, well, it could work this way. Where else could it work? And it's like, hey, I could just have this principle, and it feels weird. It feels freaky. But what if you just have that principle and that's what you live by, the non-aggression principle? And it was like, and for me, it's been, for a lot of people, it's, so, that's the challenge.
No, it's beautiful, man. It's like, cause if you have a fundamental principle that is wrong, and you build your house on it, that's why you see this constant cognitive dissonance of the left, especially because, Trump is Hitler, but give him your guns. And you see that this, keep GMOs out of our food, but pump this 5-year-old with hormones because he's knitting for a day, like these constant contradictions. And it's because their fundamental principle is off, that humans are all the same and all differences are based on oppression. That's wrong. And so out of that comes everything wrong. And the non-aggression principle is cool because it doesn't do that. And it also explains, like, China. China has one of the biggest, most powerful governments, and it has one of the worst ecological disasters.
Oh, the old Soviet Union, they had lakes of battery acid. It was a mess because nobody had any personal investment in protecting the property.
Yeah, and personal accountability. And that's also what's happening with with healthcare, where if you incentivize the lowering of insurance versus incentivizing the bloating of the costs, which is what we're currently doing, we could just lower the cost of healthcare. Where if you had people researching how to cure diseases and you're incentivized based on success and not based on bludgeoning the population with a gun, we could actually lower how much healthcare costs, because that's the real problem. Like, we just got an ultrasound. It was like $700 for this machine that looks like it's out of the first season of Star Trek. And you can kind of see that it's a human, and that's $700. We know that that's not the market price of that.
Yeah.
You know, it's just bludgeoning.
No, and for me, as you know, when I had a tumor in my throat, after a year of being dicked around in Canada, I just took a flight down to the Oklahoma Surgery Center, and they saved my life. And, you know, you say, well, it cost me some money. It's like, you know what else costs money? A funeral. Really, really quite expensive. And